explain what the organisation is and introduce you to some of the senior members as well. We'll also tell you what the organisation is not, what it'll do and what its powers will be. We've got a raft of fascinating, well-informed people to introduce you to, but first let's meet the chair and members of the senior team at ESS. They're going to set out their stall, talk about what ESS will be doing and the kinds of relationships they'll be seeking with you, the stakeholders. This is, in short, the start of a meaningful and, we hope, fruitful conversation between us. After meeting the ESS senior squad, we will have what promises to be an interesting panel discussion with a number of representatives from ESS and organisations across the sector. But before we go any further, we're going to hear from Jim Martin, Chair of ESS, who will extend his welcome to you all and set the scene for this morning's event. And following on from Jim, we have ESS Interim Chief Executive Brendan Callaghan, who'll tell us a bit more about the ESS's approach and how it's going to operate. Now, over to you, Jim.
Thanks, Claire. Well, welcome to everyone to the launch of Environmental Standards Scotland. It's so encouraging that over 100 people have signed up to be here this morning, given an hour of their time to hear what we're about. I'm going to be brief because I want to leave as much time as possible for others to ask questions and to discuss what it is we're about. But I want to give just a quick overview. So ESS was created to fill the environmental governance gap that was caused by Brexit. I think we all know that. But everyone also knows what a critical time it is for us all. And as Claire said, we're facing major challenges in biodiversity decline and in climate change. Now, ESS, we intend to play our part to help Scotland meet these challenges head on. I want to stress, and I can't stress strongly enough, that we will be an independent body. We're not a government body, we will be independent and we'll call things as we see it. Well, what will we do? Well, we'll scrutinise and monitor the actions of our public bodies, including the Scottish Government and all its agencies. We will use our powers to secure compliance with environmental laws, and we'll also assess the effectiveness of environmental laws, but we'll also look beyond Scotland, and we'll test whether Scotland is keeping pace internationally, particularly with the European Union. And how we will go about our work is set out in our interim strategy, which we are publishing today, and which Brendan Callaghan will talk you through in a moment or two. But we need your input on this interim strategy to help inform our full strategy, which we intend to consult on over the next few months and publish next year. I'm determined that we won't be a top-down organisation. We're going to be guided by the representations that are made to us by the general public and by organisations operating in the field, whether they be NGOs or community organisations. But we'll also create investigations on our own initiative, and we'll also monitor and challenge data which is published by our public bodies. I'm also committed that ESS will publish as much as we can about how we're going about our business and what we're looking at, so that the public can see and understand what it is that we're about. So we're open for business today, less than 10 months since we were given the green light by Parliament to begin our preparations. And I owe a great debt to our transition team and to our board for getting us to this point. We don't want to hear any more from me. So Brendan, would you like to talk people through our interim strategy?
Thank you, Jim. I'll give that a go. Let me just bring my presentation up. Just get that started. Okay, good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. My name's Brendan Callaghan, and I'm the Interim Chief Executive for Environmental Standards Scotland. The creation of Environmental Standards Scotland comes at a critical time. You've already heard Claire mention the twin crises of climate change and nature decline, and we're in the run-up to 2 COPs. We're here to help Scotland's ambitions for the environment and to help our communities benefit from a high-quality environment. We'll do this through our work to ensure that environmental laws are effective and complied with. We have a range of powers to scrutinise public authorities and resolve issues related to all aspects of environmental law. We've been established by new Scottish legislation which received royal assent earlier this year. And we're here to fill this gap in oversight and governance that was created by Brexit. As Jim said, we're independent from Scottish ministers and will be reporting and accountable to the Scottish Parliament. We're directed by a chair, Jim, you've already heard from, a board who will be speaking later, and we're building a team of just over 20. Lots of people have helped us to get to this point, but I'd particularly like to thank the transition team of Rebecca, Neil and Jamie that Jim mentioned. Over the last 9 months, they've put in place the policies, procedures and corporate services that we need to function as a brand new organisation. A little bit of our strategic approach. Our remit is broad and covers all public authorities and almost all aspects of the environment and environmental protection. We can investigate matters on our own initiative or in response to the concerns of others. We cover everything from the built environment that people experience, where they live and work, to Scotland's remote, wild and special protected habitats, both land and marine. Today, we've published an interim strategic plan which sets out how we will operate as a brand new organisation and how we plan to take on this challenge. This graphic shows the building blocks for our strategic approach. We've structured our strategic plan around our functions and the key outcomes we want to deliver, rather than around current environmental priorities or themes. We've taken this approach because it will be through engaging with others and monitoring performance that we identify the most important environmental issues to focus on. Our approach is informed by our values and principles that guide all that we do. I'll cover approach to delivering these key outcomes over the next few slides. So firstly, how are we going to engage and communicate with people? We'll be engaging widely to talk to people about our role and consult on our approach. This will also help us to be well informed about environmental concerns. We've started to map out relationships with a wide range of organisations to ensure we work together effectively and avoid overlaps. There will be many opportunities for working in partnership and collaborating, such as with the Climate Change Committee and the Office of Environmental Protection, our sister body, who I see are represented here today. In other cases, it will be about having clear boundaries so that people know who is best placed to help them with an environmental concern. We are open to anyone raising a concern with us about compliance or the effectiveness of law. This is called making a representation. These do need to be focused on the role of a public authority, as we're not a complaints body and we can't take compliance action in relation to individual cases. But where individual cases show a wider pattern of failure, we will look at the underlying environmental issues. And as Jim said, we'll keep people informed as we consider and investigate their concerns. And we'll also be open to receiving and considering environmental information or evidence from anyone, even if that's not in the form of a representation. We will publish reports about the issues that we've investigated, and we will keep people informed more generally about our work, for example, through updates and sharing our forward work programme, setting out the issues that we'll be considering. This will provide opportunities for people to engage with us, for example, by providing evidence or example on matters that we're actively considering. We want to be driven by our work to be driven by a detailed understanding of the environmental issues in Scotland and by the analysis of performance against environmental standards and targets. So as well as receiving representations, we will examine published data and evidence to identify areas where the law is not being effective. We'll draw on a wide range of environmental data, such as the European State of the Environment report and monitoring for the Scottish Government environmental strategy, as well as research and reporting of all manner. We'll take a proactive approach to interrogating this information, and we'll work with partners to fill knowledge gaps and identify areas of concern. This will involve undertaking critical analysis on environmental performance so we can understand how this is changing and the reasons for it. Horizon scanning and monitoring scientific and policy developments and court rulings in the UK and in the EU will help us to learn from experience elsewhere and factor this into our work. To do all of this, we are establishing a small team of specialist analysts, data and science experts. As we'll be a small organisation with a broad remit, we'll need to target our efforts and resources carefully. So it's important that we prioritise and investigate the most important matters of concern, and that we focus where we're able to identify action needed to rectify problems. When a matter is brought to us, we will undertake a preliminary review to determine whether it's suitable for investigating. Some representations may trigger an immediate investigation because of their significance or urgency. More commonly, evidence from representations will be combined with our monitoring and evaluation work to identify the priority issues that we would investigate. When we're investigating a matter, we will contact the public authorities concerned to inform them and offer them the opportunity to clarify any aspects. The investigation will involve gathering information to determine the facts of the matter and understand the processes and events that led to the issue arising. We will often need to seek advice from experts, as we won't have the internal expertise on everything. Once we've concluded an investigation, public authorities will be able to comment on our proposed conclusions, including the actions we feel are necessary to address the issue. At this stage, we would discuss with the authority whether they are able to commit to the actions. Where they're able to do this, that would enable us to resolve informally without the use of our enforcement procedures. We do have a range of legal powers to secure compliance and bring about improvements to the effectiveness of law. This diagram provides an overview of our investigation and compliance processes. The process starts at 12 o'clock, either as a result of a representation or an issue being identified through our monitoring. ESS and the public authorities are expected to work together to swiftly resolve concerns. We will therefore always seek to engage with the public authorities to try to resolve matters informally. Agreeing remedial action and solutions in this way will often be quicker and more cost effective. However, where this isn't possible within a reasonable time, we will use the statutory powers available to us to prevent further harm and reduce the risks to the environment or public health. We have three main enforcement tools set out in the legislation. We're able to issue compliance notices, probably for more straightforward matters where the remedial actions are clear and it's one or a small number of public authorities. We can produce improvement reports, which we would lay before Parliament and provide to the Scottish Government, who would be required to prepare an improvement plan. These are more likely to be used for more systematic issues or where there's multiple authorities involved. We can also take issues to the court, either to press home our compliance notices or to seek a judicial review where an issue is serious and urgent. Where we've taken action to ensure compliance, we will continue to monitor these issues and make sure the changes are implemented and take effect. So just to summarise, we're here to monitor environmental performance, improve compliance and the effectiveness of environmental law. We're independent and focused on the role of public authorities. We have new powers to secure improvements. We will work collaboratively and seek to secure improvements informally wherever possible. And we want to hear about environmental concerns. We still have a lot to do to fully establish ourselves and grow our capacity as an effective scrutiny body. We would welcome feedback on our interim strategic plan. We'll also shortly set out a programme of events for us to engage with a broad range of stakeholders. And we look forward to meeting and discussing our role with many of you. Thank you very much.
And thank you very much, Brendan. So it's going to be a small but agile new body we're talking about here. And Jim's pledge as well, not a top-down organisation either, engaged, communicating and informing people along the way. So lots to talk about. We're going to have a panel discussion now. We're delighted to be joined by a group of highly knowledgeable and experienced individuals, all of whom share a real passion for improving environmental regulation, and it is so important just now. Before I get them to introduce themselves, Jim is the quiet man. He will never actually say what he's got under his belt, but I should, sorry Jim, this is going to make you blush, but just to let you know the caliber of the people that are involved in this body, Jim's had a wide-ranging career in public service, serving as a Scottish Public Services Ombudsman for 8 years, at the Police Complaints Commissioner for Scotland. He is currently chair of the Scottish Legal Complaints Commission too, was General Secretary of the EIS. I thought I knew that name from somewhere. Jim's not going to take part in the panel, but it's over to the panel now, and I would like you to introduce yourselves. We've met Brendan, so I don't know, why don't we start with you, Marie? Let's hear a bit about you and then we'll take it from there.
Thank you, Claire. I'm Marie Fallon, and I guess you want to know why am I here? Well, it goes back to when I was a young girl, 16 years old, sitting in the school library, and I read a book by somebody called Rachel Carlson, who was seminal at that time because it was very much about Silent Spring and about environmental damage. And that really set my path for being involved in the environment. I've got a 30-year career working in various elements of the environmental policy, regulation and implementation. And for me, it's really important that environmental law exists, because without law and legislation, things don't happen. But also there are times when the law and legislation isn't fit for purpose, because my latter career in a regulatory role, I often saw that the law didn't really give us the tooth to be able to deal with an environmental issue effectively. So one of the things that drew me to working with Environmental Standards Scotland was the ability to really improve the law and make things better. Because now is such an important time. We all have seen our young people talking about the environment, and whether it's the climate change or the biodiversity situation, it's significant, and I'm really proud to be a member of the board and be able to take forward Scotland's environmental and protect it for the future. That's me.
Lovely, thanks Marie. Let's move on to you, Annalisa. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hello, everyone. I'm an environmental lawyer and an academic. I worked with environmental law for 20 years, and I now sit on the board of ESS. I relish the opportunity to establish this new body, watching over the shoulder of public authorities to ensure that environmental law in Scotland is properly enforced and effective. So my hope and wish is to deliver on this important agenda and fully exploit the powers we've been given, and help the bridge enforcement gap that affects the environmental governance in Scotland.
Thank you very much, Annalisa. Let's move on to you, Johnny. Hello. Can you hear us, Johnny? Hi.
Good morning, yes. Good morning, everyone. My name is Johnny Hall, and I'm the Director of Policy with NFU Scotland, therefore representing the interests of farmers and crofters across the country. Clearly, farming and crofting have a very clear interest and stake in the environment, from biodiversity, whether it's habitats, landscapes, species, and how we manage them, through to air and water and indeed soil quality, and all such things related to those things, and not least, of course, climate and the expectation on and the responsibility on our shoulders to deliver more in terms of climate ambitions and so on. Farming and crofting is swathed in environmental regulation, but also carries huge environmental responsibility in how it goes about its day-to-day actions and duties. So the development of Environmental Standards Scotland is an important one for us, but clearly we're a sector of the economy and a major land use in Scotland that has always been governed. But until recently, that governance has usually come from the European Commission in one form or another, through the channels of Scottish Government and into the agencies. So the role of ESS is going to be really quite critical to how we engage and how we deliver for Scotland's environment. And in particular, I want to see us working with ESS and the agencies of government and government itself to deliver better regulation around the environment that enables those tasked with the responsibility of delivering for the environment to do so, not in a confused state, and not even just in a compliant state, but in a way that champions the environment and takes our credibility and credentials forward in that respect. That means, in my opinion, that we need to look at regulation. We need to change it from just being about enforcement to being about awareness raising, information and advice. And if you look at the work that SEPA have done, for example, over recent years, I think it's been exemplary in terms of engaging with farmers and crofters as to how best we can deliver on water quality in particular. So in that respect, I'm really interested. I'd also draw a wee note of caution around how we keep pace with the EU on the one hand, but also how do we align ourselves with the rest of the UK on the other in terms of environmental regulation, which fundamentally might then have an impact or undermine even the functioning of the UK internal market. We're already starting to see certain tensions appear between different regulatory approaches across the UK. So an interesting time.
Not half, you took the words right out of my mouth. Let's move along to Shivali. Hello, tell us about yourself.
Hello everyone, I'm Shivali. I'm the Chief Officer for the Environmental Rights Centre for Scotland. We were established in January 2020 by Scottish Environment Link to address the knowledge legal capacity gap within the environmental NGO sector and support communities of place and interest to challenge poor environmental decision making or unlawful action. Now we're fully independent from Link, and after a pilot last year, we launched our free advice service on public interest environmental law in June. And since June, we've already had 28 inquiries, and we're building an evidence base of infringements, enforcement gaps, and areas desperately needing reform to advance environmental justice. And this includes, just a small number of examples, lack of sufficient regulation on river pollution, sewage sludge, and marine conservation. I could go on, but I've only got a minute and a half. So given how ESS was formed by the Continuity Act, and you've already mentioned this, to partly address the gaps in environmental governance arising from Brexit, we hope that between us, working together, we can provide Scotland with the conscience and policing needed to protect and improve Scotland's environment. So our hope for Environmental Standards Scotland is that we have a robust body that has the resources and skills to listen to citizens' concerns, fully investigate breaches, and the powers to forcefully regulate the regulators and hold public authorities to account on the environment. We at the Environmental Rights Centre for Scotland, we're looking forward to acting as the terrier at ESS's ankles, yapping and snapping if needs be to ensure that you do just that. Thank you.
You've been warned, you've been warned. Let's hop over to Deborah. Hello, Deborah.
Hey everyone, I'm Deborah Long and I'm Chief Officer at Scottish Environment Link. Link is the network for environmental NGOs, including ELCS, and all our members work in Scotland, and we work together to be the voice for Scotland's environment. I'm delighted to be here today. I see the launch of ESS as an important and really crucial step towards protecting Scotland's environment and enabling Scotland's people to stand up for it. After Brexit, when we lost access to the European Court of Justice, and as environmental legislation is rewritten into Scots law, this marks a really significant moment. ESS now, in fact, has to perform the job both of the European Court of Justice and of the Commission. Link's vision is, and always has been, that everyone who lives in Scotland has access to a healthy, unpolluted, biodiverse environment, resilient to change, and able to support community well-being through easy access to nature. Nature's got no voice, and we're looking for ESS to be another voice for nature. In terms of the sorts of tasks we see coming up, the climate and nature emergencies are inextricably linked. We can't solve one without solving the other. And Scotland has to raise its game to protect our environment, and in doing so, meet our current climate targets and the nature targets that we know will be coming at COP15. It's been a bit forgotten, COP15, but it opens in October this month, a full month before COP26, and it features the Edinburgh Declaration, which is led by the Scottish Government, which calls for governments like ours, cities and local authorities, to work together to restore biodiversity. ESS has a role in ensuring that we deliver on the Edinburgh Declaration here in Scotland. We're also looking to ESS to ensure that Scotland keeps pace with Europe and truly is a leader on climate action and biodiversity restoration. If ESS is to be the success we want it to be, it needs to be a watchdog. And I'm going to take that metaphor a little bit further. I see it a bit like a retriever, able to protect what we have, pursue what we haven't, and catch lame ducks when needed. Thanks very much.
Very nice. Okay, and Brendan, we've met you, but tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we will move on to some questions.
Okay, thanks, Claire. Yeah, well, I started off life as a forester, managing land and forests in Scotland and England, and my passion for the environment comes from my role and understanding the potential of sustainable land management and forestry management to contribute to our natural resources, the quality of our environments and our habitats. Before that, I did ecological science at university. I started off as an ecologist, in fact. So when the opportunity arose for me to move in this direction and build on my more recent role as a regulator in Scotland, prior to helping Jim with the setup here, I was the operational lead for Scottish Forestry, regulating forestry across Scotland. And I think some people were quite pleased to see me take the role and bring a pragmatic, understanding approach. But I'm certainly listening to what Deborah and Shivali are saying about the need to be you're going to be the terrier, but we're going to be the retriever.
Good luck with those ankles. That's all I'm saying. Right, you've met the team now. You know where they're coming from. And we're going to start with a question from Robbie Kernahan, Director of Sustainable Growth, Nature Scot. The question to you, Brendan, I think, is have you got an early ideas or indications, suggestions as to which areas ESS should be focusing efforts on? Oh, you're mute. Brendan, you're on mute.
Someone had to. No, well, we consciously haven't set out a list of priorities at this point, as we really want to be able to respond to the representation we receive, and we're just starting our monitoring work. So, I mean, our programme will be very much driven by prioritised representation and what's thrown up by our own evaluation and board discussions. Obviously, you've heard today from Shivali and others, and we've been hearing as we've been talking to external organisations and non-government bodies, lots of areas of interest and lots of areas of concern. But we've got to synthesise and process them. And we didn't want to distort this event by coming out and saying our top 3 priorities are. We really want to demonstrate that we're open and we're going to be gathering that and building that as we go. And that really was the basis for the structure of our strategic approach as well.
Okay, let's move on. Annalisa, I think this is probably one for you. Will Environmental Standards Scotland keep individual cases and decisions under scrutiny to identify systemic issues with processes that may be affecting nature and pinpoint major causes that could cause serious environmental harm? That's from RSPB Scotland. For you, Annalisa.
So ESS, of course, wants to hear about individual cases, and these will be considered carefully to identify any patterns of wider failure and the effectiveness of the law, really. So we are open to receiving representations about individual cases concerning public authorities' failure to enforce environmental law. Our plan is to establish processes that enable us to detect whether there are systemic patterns here and whether there are concerns to raise about the effectiveness of the law itself.
Thank you very much, Annalisa. Another question here. What are the differences between how ESS will work and the emerging plans for England, Northern Ireland and Wales? That's from Alex Mackay, Government Relations Manager, Nature Scot. And I think I'll give that one to you, Marie.
Thank you, Claire. And I can see that we've got representatives from the Office of Environmental Protection already on the call, so it's good to see you here today. And that really sort of confirms that we are working really closely with our colleagues across the other agencies. But we're the ones that are ahead of the game in the sense because we're being established today, whereas in England, the Office of Environmental Protection is still going through its final stages because the Environment Bill hasn't reached its final stage in Parliament. And while there are lots of similarities between ourselves and the other agencies, until the final bill goes through, then obviously we won't be able to establish the differences. But generally, we've been working really closely together the last few months to make sure that we understand each other's priorities, and also to understand where we can learn from each other. Because as we know, the environment doesn't take account of boundaries. It's very much a fluid thing, and we need to make sure we continue that working arrangement.
Thanks very much, Marie. Another question here. I think probably I'm going to ask you this, Brendan. Working as part of the SG team on our part of the setup of ESS, today's launch is an exciting and important day for Scotland's environment. Can you say something about what you need from others to really deliver on your strategic plan? This is from Kevin Quinlan, Environment and Forestry Director, Scottish Government. Brendan, if you could start with that, maybe we'll ask some others from the panel to jump in as well.
Okay, of course. Well, thanks for Kevin for saying that and coming up with a question. I think we'd encourage all people, community groups, organisations across Scotland to come to us and flag the concerns so that we can help identify the most important issues that we should be prioritising. We'll be engaging and working with a range of public bodies, and we'd also welcome their cooperation, investing some time to understand our role and their willingness to work with us to find out and implement solutions that will help to protect and improve the environment. And I guess thirdly, as a brand new body, as we start to develop a 3-year longer term strategic plan, we'll be looking to gather views and feedback on how we engage, cooperate and communicate and report on what we do. So will be lots of opportunities, and we'd just like people to give us the time and come to us and engage with us.
Let me ask Annalisa, have you got anything to say about that as well? We've got the opportunity.
Yes, I would add to what Brendan has said by saying that we are new, and the challenge for us is to raise awareness about the fact that we exist and about what we do. So please, please help us spreading the word. We need everybody who is here today to tell the groups I work with that we are in business, that we are here to listen and look forward to taking up the issues that you ask us to look at.
Thanks, Annalisa. Marie, would you like to say something? Another board member.
Yeah, I have to just echo the points made by Annalisa and Brendan that, you know, we're here, we want to listen, we want to engage. We know that it's a complex area, so trying to navigate our way through it and identify the key problems and the key issues that we need to focus on is our main task in the coming months. But you know, please bring issues to us. We want to hear from you and engage in the consultation that Brendan talked about in terms of our engagement programme that we've got set ahead.
And maybe some observations from the guys that aren't on the board. Johnny, maybe you'd like to take up a point here.
Yes, thanks. So obviously, Brendan referred very clearly to interaction between ESS and public agencies. I think there's also a very, very clear role for ESS and the public agencies to engage with the private sector, i.e. those who are responsible for a significant amount of land management in Scotland, so that we, the folk on the ground who are responsible for delivery, responsible for club compliance, can actually understand what's expected of us. And I think a lot of that comes back to that message I tried to convey earlier about better regulation, enabling regulation, and that partnership approach throughout. And I guess going back to Kevin's original question, I would really want to see that partnership being developed very fully as ESS grows and develops with more established bodies such as ourselves, as well as the agencies we work with more regularly, SEPA, Nature Scot, and not forgetting ARPID, that's the Rural Payments and Inspections Division.
Thanks, Johnny. Shivali, would you like to stick your tuppence worth in on this as well?
I think probably what everybody else has said is really helpful. I think particularly, Johnny, your point about non-state actors and how do we enforce regulation on non-state actors. I think that's something that we do need to think about for the future. And then, of course, community groups and how will we enable those less heard voices to bring their concerns to the table, and let's make that as easy and as straightforward, because less heard voices are doing lots of things. They're very busy. It's not their responsibility to come to you. It's also your responsibility to go to them. So very much looking forward to working with you to think about how we can increase accessibility.
Okay, and Deborah, to you.
Thanks, Claire. I think as a fellow kind of champion of the environment, really, our members and Link itself are very much committed to working with the ESS and other organisations right across Scotland in order to address the ongoing loss of biodiversity, work to restore it, ensure everyone has access to a healthy environment, and that environmental law is effective and applied effectively. but we have massive challenges, all of us, in front of us in terms of climate change and nature loss. And Johnny's point really is a key one for us, that if we're going to solve all of this stuff, we really do need to work together. So it's the partnership angle that's really important for us, and we can help. I think our members will definitely do all they can, obviously, to help identify the issues, be a point of contact between ESS and members of the public, whether they're communities of place or communities of identity. Both communities are going to be very, very important for this. And we will commit to highlighting what we do well and where we need to do better. So I think that's probably the best way we can help ESS deliver on the strategic plan.
Okay, thank you very much, Deborah. Another question now from Mike Daniels, Head of Policy and Land Management, John Muir Trust. Brendan, I think I'll direct this towards you, if that's okay. How can concerns about damage to designated sites be reported, and what enforcement actions will be available? In other words, how do people make representations to ESS?
Okay, that was a great question to have to sort of set that out and promote that availability. We have a representation form which you can get on our website. We've actually just been finalising that in the last few days and getting advice from people like Shivali and Deborah at Environment Link. So that should be quite easy to get hold of and quite easy to fill out, and just needs to be sent in to us. When we get those, we'll consider these issues, and we have to check that there's how they relate to the law, and whether a public authority has a role in it. There might be some situations there's nothing we can do, but if we can identify areas where the law's not been effective or not been complied with, then we can certainly look to investigate that and seek to identify actions that would address the non-compliance or the lack of effectiveness. And as previously said, we'll try to resolve that informally with the public authority, but we're perfectly prepared to press those home using our informal powers. And we can do this by issuing compliance notices. I think the issue perhaps with protected sites is making that clear link to the role of the public authorities and the legal duties. So some of these things will need a little bit of investigation, understanding, and a critical analysis to really nail down where it is we can act. But we're set up and ready to take that on.
Excellent. Before I go any further, I'm going to remind you there's a new Twitter tag for you all, at EnvStanScot. That's at ENVSTAN Scott. And our LinkedIn, Environmental Standards Scotland, as well, if you're wanting to keep in touch with what's happening, and we surely hope you do. Right, Annalisa, I think I'll pitch this one to you. Professor Elisa Morguera, Professor of Global Environmental Law, Strathclyde Centre for Environmental Law and Governance. Blimey, that's a mouthful. How does ESS plan to engage with human rights in its work, and how does it plan to contribute to the broader process of human rights leadership in Scotland in order to advance environmental standards? That's a big question as well. Thank you, Elisa. Annalisa.
Thanks, Elisa. She's a good friend of mine. We've known each other for many years. Good to see you in the audience. We are a public body, and as such, we are bound to comply with environmental rights. These are enshrined in the law of the country by means of measures implementing the Aarhus Convention. We are not a judicial body, but we are bound to provide access to information, public participation, and access to remedies as prescribed by the law. So we are building the organization in line with these core principles. We will make sure that we establish procedures that are fair and transparent and align with environmental rights. At the same time, we will look carefully at what the Scottish Government will propose on human rights during this Parliament, and we'll make sure that we hold them to account for complying with any laws that the Parliament might adopt on this matter.
Okay, maybe Shivali would like to jump in on this as well.
Oh yes, thank you. And first of all, thanks to Lisa for the question, and also for, I think, particularly her guidance within the National Task Force for Human Rights Leadership, and the resultant commitment by the Scottish Government to incorporate the right to a healthy environment with both substantive and procedural elements in the new Human Rights Scotland Bill. And we know how important this right is to enable all our human rights, and Annalisa has mentioned this, but I think for those in the audience who don't know so much about what this means for us as citizens, Incorporation of the substantive human right to a healthy environment will include the 6 features recommended by the task force. So that's clean air, a safe climate, access to safe water and adequate sanitation, healthy and sustainably produced food, non-toxic environments in which to live, work, study and play, and healthy biodiversity and ecosystems. And we know of the 156 out of 193 United Nations member states, they've already recognised this human right to a healthy environment. And there's evidence that the incorporation of a human right to a healthy environment is associated with improved environmental outcomes. So this right, for the first time, will give the public a legal basis to have a healthy environment as a standalone human right, and place a legal obligation to the Scottish Government to meet the conditions to comply with this right. So absolutely, as Annalisa says, we see ESS as crucial in upholding this substantive right by using its powers as the board have already outlined. And by doing so, it will advance our procedural rights by filling the governance gap left by Brexit. That's what we hope. And as Annalisa says, this procedural right is about incorporating the Aarhus Convention, which Scotland is obliged to implement. But, and I do need to put this bit in, Scotland's legal system is currently not compliant with the Aarhus Convention on access to justice due to the excessive costs of environmental litigation. And it's lovely to hear that ESS will support our procedural right, but it can't alone address the deficits in access to justice on the environment. And so more does need to be done. We believe that as well as incorporating the Aarhus Convention in the Human Rights Bill, we need to review judicial expenses so that we can reduce costs. And we also think we need to develop a specialist environmental court or tribunal. This model will reduce costs and time and increase accessibility by hearing environmental cases in one place, and increase the expertise and efficacy of judges in interpreting environmental law. That was a little bit of a lecture, but I think the important bit about that is that we hope that the ESS will support and advocate for legal reforms now that can allow the public to hold the government to account through the credible threat of public interest litigation as a last resort to protect the environment. So on your own, you can't do it, but hopefully with us supporting you, we can advocate for that reform. Thank you.
Let me bounce that very quickly to Brendan. Is that something, do you want to have a comment about that off the back of what? Foreign policy on the hoof, just a response.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly an area I expect our board to be discussing and taking seriously. We recognise that barriers to access to justice on environmental law is a subset of environmental law, so it's something that's potentially within our remit. But it's slightly tricky territory, and it's one I think we're going to need to discuss as a board and set a direction following that.
Oh, lots of interesting conversations ahead. Let me ask another question. This one's from Annie Robertson, Project Officer Scotland, Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management. She asks, how will the existence and remit of ESF be raised, and how will it be made accessible to all? I think, Brendan, you should answer that one.
Well, yeah, thanks. Well, I mean, we took the decision to do today's launch event, even though we couldn't have a physical event and buy you all a drink. But you know, I'd ask you all to go back from this event and have a conversation with your colleagues and teams, tell them about ESS, you know, point them to our website, point them to some of our materials. If you could invest a little bit of time, that will be very helpful. That's probably a key way for getting a message out. I mean, it's a fantastic time to be launching this organisation, as we've already said, because it's unprecedented levels of interest in the environment. And so we've already had a lot of interest from the media, and I think they're going to see pretty good coverage over the next few days. And that's before we've actually done anything and before we've actually sort of picked up an issue. So I think, you know, and we are still growing the organisation. So in a way, I wouldn't really want the floodgates to open on Monday before we've got our full team in place. And the other thing we'll be doing, as I said, over the next few months, we're not done in determining our procedures and our strategic approach. we published an interim strategic plan to get us going so that everyone knows how we're going to operate. But we want to come and talk and through a series of events to people about the sort of more medium-term approach and get any comments on that and refine that. And then we'll be putting that to Parliament during 2022 as they need to agree and approve that. So lots of things in mind, but yeah, please all go away and tell your friends.
This is the opening salvo for a conversation, a genuine conversation. If I could very briefly ask all the panelists here to comment on that, how things will be raised, how accessible it will be. Maybe Deborah, you could start very briefly, just give us a comment on that.
Sure, I think Annalisa made the point really early on, actually, that the main thing is that ESS needs to be very clearly signposted. It needs to be very easy to use. It needs to be transparent and accessible. And I think it's that accessibility that will be its strength. And it's the fact that people and communities feel able to bring issues to it, that those issues can be acted upon and that they can be resolved in a timely way. So everyone needs to know it exists, obviously, and that it exists to ensure that everyone in Scotland can help protect our home, the environment. And that's going to require constant communications. We're making a great start today, but it goes a long way beyond today. So we need to keep doing that. But I think the key measure for this is that we need to see that ESS is successful and that it's seen to be working. That's going to be the real measure, and that's going to be what makes it work.
Okay, let me get you, Shivali, to say something briefly about that as well.
No, I think I've said enough, and I agree with what Deborah said, what she said. Thank you.
Okay, Johnny, don't say what she said.
No, I won't. I think obviously the existence word has been used a number of times in the last couple of minutes. I think the function word really needs to be spelled out very clearly as well. You know, many organizations exist. I think a lot of the time farmers and crofters don't quite appreciate what their function actually is, and how they're not necessarily just there to enforce. It is about that piece that I keep playing out about engaging and thinking about how better we can regulate in order to get the outcomes we want. Enforcement isn't an outcome, and you know, the environmental outcomes we actually want require a lot more than just regulation and their enforcement.
We're all going to have to think and act differently. In other words, that's the point. We've got an opportunity now to do it. Marie, what's your point?
Yeah, I just agree with others really, in that, you know, we're going to be able to, we want to be accessible and trusted as an organisation, and inevitably we've got a bit of hype at the moment, but we want to maintain that. And I think our sort of key task will be to keep a check to make sure that we are still accessible and that people understand what we're doing. So I think one of the things we're going to be looking at as part of our communication strategies, are we still reaching the parts we need to reach in the coming months? So that's something we're going to keep an eye on at the board, I think.
And what about you, Annalisa?
I would add that, you know, these pandemic times have made it more difficult to meet with people, but Brendan has explained our plan is to go out and engage with our stakeholders. But what we have proposed is out there. Now, take a look and get in touch if there are suggestions on things that you think we may do to become even more accessible. Please let us know, because we're open to suggestions.
Excellent. Now, there's a question that I suppose, you know, I've seen this one here, and it's one that, of course, I thought of, because the word independent is bandied about quite a lot, about what you guys, what this body will do. So let me ask you, Brendan, and if anyone else wants to jump in as well from the board, how independent will ESS be from government? Brendan.
Yeah, well, totally independent. We've left the mothership where so I mean, ministers have no role in determining the issues that we look at or our processes. We actually have, as I said earlier, we have to submit our strategic plan to Parliament, and they have to approve that. So that's where we're accountable. And in fact, ministers and Scottish Government are a body that we could take action against under our jurisdiction. So it's very important that we can't, on the one hand, be the regulate, you know, having this oversight role, and on the other, there's a back channel that they're able to sort of limit what we can do. So we've, you know, anyone really wants to delve into that, there's a framework document where we've mapped all of this out, and that's pretty dry reading, but it's the kind of place where all of this has been thought through in detail, and that's available on our website. But yeah, no, I can absolutely assure you, even our board members and our chairman, that their appointments confirmed by the Parliament. And that's so. I mean, it's notable some of the issues that have been discussed around the Environment Bill. They're really looking in England to adopt similar approaches to the approach that we have in Scotland. You know, I think they recognise that we have quite a good job has been done in establishing a framework that can be seen to be independent.
I think we've got time for just a couple more questions, but what about this one here that I've got? Are you going to be liaising directly with the EU and European Environment Agency? Again, Brendan, that's probably one for you, but if anyone else from the board wants to pick that up, that's cool.
Well, actually, we will. We've picked up that relationship, and in fact, one of our board members is not on the call today. Paul McAlevey works in the European Commission in the environment area. And so we've got various channels, but no, I mean they continue to fulfil this role across the rest of Europe, and in fact they're interested in our approach, a more local approach, more sort of boots on the ground approach, direct within the country connections, and that may be the way the EU goes. Who knows? But most certainly we will be keeping close links, monitoring their policy developments, looking at the types of issues that they identify. And as I say, it's already had an impact on the development of our procedures. You know, that the EU have over the years they've been doing this role, had identified the benefits of having a strong monitoring and evaluation and having a proactive approach to identify the issues. So that's why we've come up with this blended approach that's both representations and investing significant resource in our monitoring and evaluation.
We've got loads of questions here. Maybe just one more. I'm just struggling to pick which one, but maybe this one. What's going to be your role in relation to climate change?
Do you want me to pick that one up, or
anyone else who wants to pick it up? You know, it would be interesting.
Well, I'll give it a steer, but not say too much. Then, yeah. We ourselves weren't initially sure. I mean, the early stages of developing the organisation and the legislation initially looked like it would rule out climate change, but actually no. It's the climate change legislation is very much within the scope of the function of Environmental Standards Scotland. So yeah, we will be looking at that. We will be receiving representations on that, and we will be looking at the performance of public bodies, and you know, are they doing what they're fulfilling their duties? And the other thing I think I've already mentioned, we've already had some really useful discussions with the Climate Change Committee, and they have a role to advise ministers, but they have no enforcement or regulatory powers. So it's quite likely we'll be working hand in hand with them, feeding off their analysis and information and using that to inform the sorts of issues we might investigate.
Don't know if anyone else wants to jump in. Annalisa, do you, or Marie?
Yes, very briefly, we have a broad remit. Climate change is clearly an issue that we will be looking at, as well as many others. But as an expert in climate change law, you can imagine that we will be keeping our eyes out and open, because there are a number of areas of concern, and we will be, of course, be listening to what the stakeholders have to say and their concerns they have to raise about the enforcement of climate change law specifically.
Okay, I think we're probably getting out of time now. We are. It's just to say that if we didn't get to your specific question in this session, we're very happy to make sure it reaches the guys at ESS team and they can respond to you. It isn't possible to get through all these points, but we hope you will allow us to forward your comments and queries in order to address anything that we haven't been able to cover today. This is just a hello, as we said. Let me thank each and every one of our distinguished panel members, and of course, Jim Martin and Brendan Callahan from ESS. Thanks to you too, our audience, who we are hopeful are going to go away feeling energized about our shared goals and challenges. If you need any more information, that Bible, our document, can be accessed on the ESS website. The ESS team are very happy to talk to you in more detail. You can contact them, inquiries@environmentalstandards.scot. More info on the website, www.environmentalstandards.scot, LinkedIn, Environmental Standards Scotland, and at EnvStanScot Twitter handle. This is the beginning of a journey for us all. We're addressing the most pressing issue of our times, the environment and biodiversity challenges. And ESS is committed to doing all it can to ensure an environmentally safe and healthy future for our dear green part of the planet. Help us to shape and grow that ambition. Be a partner in that with us. Keep your conversations and observations coming. We need your input. We are experts in the field. We're also learning how to do things better. With your help, that will make ESS relevant to all of our citizens and organisations in Scotland. As you might know by now, we're very excited about this. We're committed to championing safe and efficient implementation of environmental law. COP26 is going to come and go. We're here for the duration. A final reminder that interim strategy document for Environmental Standards Scotland can be found or viewed and downloaded from the website Environmental Standards Scot. That's a wrap. Just let me wish you a very happy remainder of Friday and a good weekend when it comes. Bye for now.
Thank you, Claire.